Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, I'd like to discuss with you a central feature of the Haggadah, and that is the opinion of Rabban Gamliel. After we finished the excitement of Dayenu, we switch gears and look at the topic of Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. And according to Rabban Gamliel, the text says like this: Rabban Gamliel said, כל שלא אומר שלושה דברים אלו בפסח לא יצא ידי חובתו בהן. Anyone who does not recite these three concepts on Pesach has not fulfilled his duty, namely Pesach, Matzah, or Maror. It seems that according to Rabban Gamliel, one is obligated, one has to make mention of these three elements if one is to fulfill the mitzvah of the Seder night. The couple of questions that we raise from this is, number one, what happens if I don't make mention of Pesach, Matzah, Maror? Do I still fulfill my obligation of the Seder? And secondly, the statement of Rabban Gamliel doesn't seem to be in chronological order. If I'm looking at the history, I would have said, surely we should start off with Maror, then talk about the Pesach, and then the Matzah, which was, didn't we eat because the food didn't have time to rise when we left Egypt. So what exactly is Rabban Gamliel trying to do? Just to add an extra dimension to this, one of the great commentators and the halachic authorities of all time is someone named the Rambam, Rav Moshe ben Maimon. And the Rambam in his laws of Pesach, called Hilchot Chametz U'Matzah, twice brings the statement of Rabban Gamliel. And he says like this: Pesach, Matzah, U'Maror. So the Rambam, quoting the opinion of Rabban Gamliel, quotes the Mishnah of Beit and Pesach, Matzah, Maror. However, when he comes to his discussion of the Seder itself, he changes the order and says Pesach, Maror, and then Matzah. So what's going on over here? In terms of chronology, Pesach, Maror, Matzah makes no sense. Pesach, Matzah, Maror also makes no sense. So what exactly is going on here? So to answer this question, I found every year I try to find a new Haggadah. And a few years ago, I picked up one called The Exalted Evening, Insights by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. And Soloveitchik raises this particular question within the Rambam. And he gives us a couple of insights which I think are worthy to take note of. First of all, the Haggadah is not stories. It's not bringing us the historical or chronological order of the events of Egypt. It is rather an act of Talmud Torah, the study of Torah, engaging in Torah. And the focus of the Haggadah is to give us a couple of important themes. If it was giving us the chronological order, it might have been a much longer text than what we currently have. So the first thing we have to dispel, or myth we have to dispel, is that the purpose of the Haggadah is not to give us a chronological description, but rather to give us a educational or Torah experience. So therefore, if that is the case, what exactly is Rabban Gamliel's educational message? What is he trying to teach us in regards to the distinction between Pesach, Matzah, and Maror? So first of all, what is Pesach, Matzah, and Maror? Pesach refers to the Paschal lamb. On the eve of Pesach, the Jewish people were to go to Jerusalem, slaughter a lamb, put it on a spit, and then that lamb was used to say as part of the Seder experience. It was eaten at the end of the meal, ala sova it says, when they were full, and was eaten together with Matzah and Maror. As the Hebrew text says, al matzot umororim yochluha. They shall eat it with matzah and maror. That is the biblical obligation. And it seems that the reason for Pesach and matzah, the reason to why we eat matzah, we eat Pesach, matzah, maror, is that they are connected to the Paschal offering. What to do today when there is no Pesach offering? Well, maror falls away. because the only mention of Maror in the Pesach Seder or Pesach experience is in the context of Matzah, of the Paschal lamb. The rabbis didn't want this to happen, and therefore instituted it as a rabbinic obligation that we should never forget the obligation of Maror, to add Maror to our Seder. Okay, what about Matzah? There seems to be two reasons why we have the Matzah at the Seder. The one, you should eat Pesach lamb, with the Pesach lamb, Matzah and Maror. So it seems to be, on the one hand, the obligation to eat Matzah is related to the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering. On the other hand, there's an independent obligation, or chiyuv, to eat Matzah on Seder night, on the first night of Seder. And therefore, and thus, eating Matzah on Seder night is for could come under the two headings. One, Paschal lamb, which today falls away. And two, there's the individual obligation, separate independent obligation of eating matzah on first night of Seder, and that certainly does apply. For this reason, when we eat the matzah at Seder night, we say two blessings over it. One, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and the second one, al achilat matzah, for eating matzah. So what we have over here is that the eating of the Pesach lamb is an obligation from the Torah. The matzah, and that seems to be the primary obligation of Seder night. A second obligation from the Torah is eating matzah, which has a dual status, linking to Korban Paschal lamb and matzah in its own right. And thirdly, the maror, which according to the Torah is subservient or secondary to the Korban Pesach, adding flavor to it in its own right, to remember the maror of the bitterness of Egypt. And today, without the temple, it is a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. So, based on this insight of why we have these three mitzvah obligations, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, we can now come to answer up Rabban Gamliel's description. Pesach, Matzah, Maror, says Rabban Gamliel. Why? It refers to their religious obligations. Since the main focus of first night Seder and the whole ritual in the day, particularly in the day of the temple, was Pesach, or the Paschal lamb, it therefore is mentioned first. The second one being matzah, right? And then thirdly, on a much lower level, is the maror. So that answers up the order of Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. What about the Rambam's description of mixing it around, right? Where he says Pesach, Maror, and Matzah. What's going on over there? So if one reads through the Haggadah, the laws of the Rambam, and Maimonides was very particular when he writes his laws, and when he adds something or he changes something, there's a definite reason why he would do this. And Rav Soloveitchik suggests that if you read the Rambam carefully, the answer is clear to be seen. When the Rambam describes the Seder of today, he describes Pesach, Matzah, Maror. The reason for this is that the reason is as follows. Pesach, we can't do anymore. Right? There is no temple, we can't offer the Paschal lamb. But there isn't a rabbinic obligation called Zeichel HaMikdash, is how they used to celebrate in the days that the temple took place. And in the days of the temple took place, the Paschal lamb was primary, or the main obligation. And as such, Rabban Gamliel wants us to remember this, and therefore places the Pesach lamb, the Pesach first. Then the matzah, and then the maror. But in the days of the temple, if we're looking at the obligations, we have the Pesach lamb, and then the maror is a biblical obligation when you have the Pesach lamb, so it's directly related. And if there was no Pesach lamb, you would not bring the maror. So there's a direct link between Pesach and the Paschal lamb and the maror. So therefore, right, Pesach first, and then directly to maror. Matzah is related to the Paschal lamb, as it says, you shall eat it. But at the same time, there's a second obligation, or independent obligation, midoraita, from the Torah, to eat matzah. And so in the days of the temple, we go Pesach, Maror, and then Matzah. So today we follow the following principles. We start with Pesach Mitzrayim, then, which is a Zeichel Mikdash. We then head into the world of Matzah, which is a biblical obligation for the night of Seder. And then we do the Maror, which is a rabbinic obligation, which is a next level down. So the order of Rabban Gamliel is Torah laws and then rabbinic laws. You could argue with me and say, well, in that case, it should be Matzah, Pesach, Maror, or Matzah, Maror, Pesach, because the Matzah is a biblical obligation, the Maror is a rabbinic obligation, and the Paschal Lamb we don't even do. But Rabban Gamliel wants to remind us that even though there is no temple, we still want you to remember the primacy of Paschal Lamb on the night of the Seder. There's an interesting custom that we perform on Seder night, and this follows on this theme. On the Seder table, we have two meats. We have the shank bone, which reminds us of the Paschal Lamb, the zroa, and we have the egg. And as part of this, the meal, the first part of the meal for a majority of Ashkenazi families that I've surveyed, is that they have egg dipped in salt water. Why egg dipped in salt water? Because the egg represents the Korban Chagiga, the festival sacrifice that was eaten in the days of the temple. Not many people know this, but there were two, that on Seder night, the original Seder in the days of the temple was a mass barbecue. And we'd have to eat meat from two separate animals. A chagiga, a lamb or goats brought as part of the festival celebrations. And then on alasova, when you're already full from the first course of meat, they would then wheel in the lamb on the spit, and then you'd eat your matzah and your maror in a hillel sandwich, which looks like a modern day hamburger. So, to remind us of the korban giga that was eaten first, we eat egg in salt water. Now, you may ask yourself, why eggs in salt water? If anything, there was a symbol of mourning. The round egg is certainly a symbol of mourning, as is the salt water. And so we eat the egg in salt water to remind us of the korban chagiga, the festival sacrifice, which would have been eaten at this part of the meal had we been in Jerusalem with the temple, but we don't. And therefore, we eat the food of a symbolic food of sadness as part of the Seder. We cannot be sad on Seder night because it's a Yom Tov, but we hint to it by eating a food of mourners, egg and salt water. This is an interesting aside in the terms of atbash, which is one of the gematrias in which we study, the sages study or break down biblical texts. Aleph is replaced with tav, bet is replaced with shin. And if we look at the way that the days of Pesach, Aleph, the first day of Pesach, corresponds to a Hebrew date which begins with a tav, which is Tisha B'Av. First day Pesach is always going to be Tisha B'Av. So there's this link between Pesach and Tisha B'Av. But because we don't have a Pesach Mikdash anymore, we cannot celebrate Pesach in its true form anymore, and hence we have the food of mourning, the eggs in salt water. For those of you who are meat eaters, even more depressing is that when it comes to the end of the Seder, we go search for the afikoman, and we bring the afikoman to the table. That was when they would eat the korban Pesach with the matzah. So all we have left is just the matzah, but we should remember that when we're eating afikoman, that was when they would eat the korban Pesach in its own right. So what we found so far is that the Rabban Gamliel's teachings of Pesach, Matzah, and Maror is not chronological, but rather is referring to a halachic discussion, the nature of the obligations of Seder night, the primary obligation being the Paschal Lamb, then the Matzah, and then the Maror. Adkan, the ideas of Rav Soloveitchik. I would like to add in, with your permission, a philosophical idea regarding Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, and it has to do with education. When we look at the Seder, the purpose of Seder night It is truly a night of education. If we think about it, the Haggadah to Levincha, the whole night starts with the child asking questions and us responding. And therefore, the question that's being put to us is, how do I educate my child, and how do I connect my child to his and her Jewish roots and Jewish identity? And Rabban Gamliel is offering us a very important insight. One of the controversial discussions that happens within Jewish day schools is how to teach Jewish history. Do we sugarcoat everything and things tell only the good stuff? What about the negative stuff, the negative stories? Because the child is going to be exposed to them and to criticism, anti-Semitism when they leave home. Is Israel perfect? Does Israel make mistakes? All these questions are certainly on the table when it comes to education. So what should you do? Rabban Gamliel offers us a model which I think is important. Rabban Gamliel says, teach the order should be Pesach, Matzah, and then Maror. Well, if I'm using the ideas of Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, I can suggest the following. Everything to do with Pesach, everything to do with Pesach is positive. So, for example, when I look at the Paschal lamb, right? It is brought a la sova. There's great celebrations with the Paschal lamb. It is a celebration, and it speaks about the night of going out of Egypt. What could be greater in terms of the Jewish story than freedom from slavery, freedom from escaping from Egypt, and forging a new destiny which would lead us to Har Sinai. Matzah is transitional. The matzah starts off as halachma anya. This is the bread of affliction that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. As we work our way through the Haggadah, and we arrive at Rabban Gamliel, that same food, which was the symbol of slavery, has been transformed into a symbol of freedom. If we then look, my message is as follows, that there are times in our history which are transitional, when we're traveling through the desert, when we're moving from times of difficulty, but not exactly arriving at Har Sinai and the celebrations of Har Sinai. And finally, we have the Maror. The Maror is by name and by description means the bitterness, and represents the bitterness of the experience, the Jewish experiences.
There it is. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi, and Hag Sameach. Thank you. Bye.
And the Maror represents this. Maror represents the bitterness of the bitter periods of Jewish history. Rabban Gamliel is saying as follows: Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. When it comes to educating the children, we start off with Pesach experiences. Tell them the good stories, the victories, that which makes us feel connected, makes us feel proud. We then move on to the transitional parts of history, and only once the child is connected fully are we willing to introduce them to the more difficult parts of Judaism. When it comes to understanding Jewish history and our role in Jewish history, if we start off with the negativity, all that we will have is children being turned off and saying, if this is what they did to me, to my grandparents, why should I want to be Jewish? But by starting with the positive, that we have this relationship with Hashem, who takes us out of Egypt, who brings us to the land of Israel, who fulfills the words of the prophets. This is inspiring, and the child is inspired. He and she are part of a great people who have a history that extends almost 4,000 years. Who does not want to be part of it and learn from it? And once this child is in as such or connected, then we can discuss issues of matzah, or even deal with the issues of the maror. So Rabban Gamliel is giving us a template of education. Start off with the positives, and then reveal do not hide the difficulties, do not hide the maror experiences, because that's also part of our story and part of our history. But it has to be done in the context of has to be done in the context of Pesach and Matzah. So just to summarize, Rabban Gamliel was lived in the generation post the destruction of the temple. And Rabban Gamliel wants to highlight to us that the primary mitzvot of Seder night are Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Pesach being the Paschal lamb, and we do this by pointing to the shank bone on the Seder plate. We don't lift up the shank bone. We don't even have roasted meats at Seder night, or barbecued meat on Seder night, because we know that things aren't complete. We then move on to the world of Matzah, which is a biblical obligation in its own right, independent of the Paschal lamb. And finally, we are referred to the Maror, whose obligation in the days of the temple, when there was a Paschal lamb, was biblical, but today is rabbinic. So that's the story that's the teaching of Rabban Gamliel. There's one final point I'd like to make, and about the importance of the Paschal lamb and the Paschal meal, or Seder meal. At the beginning of the Seder meal, we make a declaration in Aramaic called Ha Lachma Anya. This is the bread of affliction that our people ate in the land of Egypt. We then make a call called Dichvin Yete V'Yecho. Anyone who's hungry, let them come and eat. Why was this so important to be written into the Haggadah? And I'd just like to finish by reading to you a little bit of Rabbi Soloveitchik's ideas. He says, the birth of the Chesed community, of a nation within which people unite, give away things, care for each other, share what they possess, is symbolized by the Paschal sacrifice. God did not need the Paschal lamb. He had no interest in the sacrifice. He simply wanted the people, slaves who have come out of the house of bondage, to emerge from their isolation and insane self-centeredness into a chesed community, where the little that man has is too much for himself, where whatever he possesses transcends his ability to enjoy. A new fellowship was formed around the Paschal lamb. A new community sprang into existence. Being together, living with each other, sharing something many possess in common, was made possible by the ceremony of the Paschal lamb. The Halacha coined the term chavura, with reference to the group gathering together for the ceremonial. Eating together is a great medium of communication between individuals, therefore everything is shared. The slave suddenly realized that the little he had saved for himself, a single lamb, is too much for him. The slave spontaneously does something that he would never have believed he was capable of doing. Namely, he knocks on the door of a neighbor whom he had never noticed, inviting him in to share the lamb and to eat together. This is part of the importance of the Paschal celebration and the Paschal lamb. It was an educational message to the slaves in Egypt that you're no longer slaves. You don't have to worry about yourself anymore. You need to expand your circle to include others and become part of a community. This year, we are almost reenacting the Seder of Egypt. We're all going to be locked in our houses, separated from one another as a mashchit, as a terrible destroyer roams the streets outside. Please God, we'll be able to leave our homes as the Jews did on that fateful night, and travel to a glorious future. May the experiences that we abide in this particular year be ones that we learn from and inspire, learn from to become that chesed community, being kind and caring to others. At the moment, our being kind means to separate, but as the Jews in Egypt were after the Seder night were allowed to open their doors and leave and form a faith community, so too when the doors are finally open for all of us and we are able to leave, may we too merit to form that faith community that will make a difference. And may the experiences of this terrible time, of this plague that has hit the world, transform the world to become one which is more caring and considerate for each and every one. I wish you all a Chag Kasher B'Sameach.